The galaxy seemed to hold its breath the moment the broadcast began. Not a voice echoed across the relay networks. Not a single engine hum could be heard in the great orbiting stations. Every screen, from the neon markets of the outer loops to the marble halls of the Imperial Core, displayed the same image. Two human generals standing on a raised platform of obsidian stone, General Rene Carter and General Leia Montgomery, names that carried weight even among species who could not pronounce them correctly, stood bound at the wrists but unbowed. The execution stage beneath their feet was crafted to intimidate, a dark spire jutting upward like a blade meant to cut through galaxies. Yet both women faced the crowd with an unshakable calm that unnerved even the most hardened aliens in attendance. The executioner, a massive Voron warrior whose armor glowed like molten rock, stepped forward to announce the charges. Espionage, sabotage, defiance. None of it true, but lies repeated with the confidence of an empire drunk on its own authority. Carter inhaled once, steady and unimpressed. Montgomery tilted her head slightly and offered the smallest hint of a smirk. "Wrong call," Carter said gently. "And expensive," Montgomery added. "We usually bill for fixing your mistakes." Their humor, quiet, razor-sharp, spread unease among their captors. Humans possess this strange trait, joking even at death's door. Every species had a story about it. A squad of humans laughing in the middle of a battlefield. A human casually offering their captors snacks during interrogations. A human cracking jokes after an explosion knocked them off their feet. But every species also knew the other truth. When humans stopped joking, the universe should start worrying. The executioner raised the twin blades, arcs of molten light, and brought them down. The feed cut instantly. For 3 seconds, the galaxy stayed silent. A silence so complete that even the automated drones paused their routines, uncertain. Then the Empire broadcast its final message, a triumphant declaration of victory over Earth's most respected generals, and a demand for humanity's unconditional surrender. Earth responded far sooner than anyone expected. The screen flickered to life and showed a lone human standing behind a black steel podium. No flags, no soldiers, no crowd. Just Commander Avery Hale, immaculately dressed in a dark civilian suit, his expression polite to the point of being unsettling. He offered a gentle smile. "Thank you for the update. Earth acknowledges your message. Please remain where you are. We'll be in touch shortly." And with a small nod, almost courteous, the transmission ended. Reactions erupted across the galaxy. The Chromac clans broke into laughter, convinced humans were about to surrender with embarrassing politeness. The crystalline Seraphi scholars murmured anxiously that humans only smiled like that when preparing something catastrophic. The Selkrath, an ancient aquatic species, whispered their old proverb, "Still oceans hide the deepest storms." But then, Earth went silent. No retaliatory threats, no outraged broadcasts, no dramatic military speeches, just quiet. And this silence shook the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. Humans were naturally loud, singing during chores, shouting during sports, banging metal pots to celebrate holidays. A silent humanity was something new, something cold, something dangerous. Hours passed. No news, no statements, nothing. Only one message appeared. A funeral would be held at Dawn Point, Earth's sacred canyon reserved for heroes whose names lived across centuries. When the broadcast began, the galaxy watched in collective awe. The canyon shimmered in golden light. Thousands of humans stood in complete stillness, candles forming rivers of fire through the valley. Avery Hale stepped forward, carrying two folded flags, his face composed but carved with restrained grief. He placed each flag upon an obsidian pedestal and spoke with quiet reverence. "They were soldiers not because they loved war," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "but because they loved peace fiercely enough to defend it." The wind carried sparks upward like tiny stars. Avery lifted his gaze toward the galaxy's watching eyes and gave a small, almost peaceful smile. "We are not at war," he said softly. Across the stars, species breathed in relief. Then he added, "We are merely awake." The change was immediate. The subtle shift in humanity's posture, like a collective intake of breath, rippled across every corner of the galaxy. The silence that had hung over Earth after the executions was broken, not by a cry for revenge, but by something much more unsettling. The quiet before the storm. Commander Avery Hale stood in front of the galaxy's representatives, calm and composed, but his eyes, sharp and calculating, betrayed nothing of the storm that had been brewing the Galactic Summit chamber, a room built to intimidate with its towering obsidian pillars and holographic banners that flickered with imperial pride, suddenly felt small, not because of its vastness, but because of the weight of the figure standing at its center. Avery carried nothing but a simple thermos, an accessory that seemed out of place in such a formal setting. But it was precisely this calm dissonance that unnerved the alien dignitaries who stared at him with varying expressions of confusion, hostility, and trepidation. A few old hands at galactic politics recognized the gravity of his demeanor. This was not the first time a human had walked into a room like this, but it was the first time the room seemed so ill-suited to the visitor. He set the thermos down and took a slow sip, the smell of coffee, Earth's second most sacred substance, drifting through the air. The insectoid Klee ambassador, his compound eyes flickering with unease, glanced at the thermos nervously. "Coffee," Avery said with a smile, as if explaining something perfectly ordinary. "The second most sacred substance on Earth." The room fell silent. Some delegates, unsure of how to interpret this, exchanged glances. No one laughed. The Voran Chancellor, his towering bulk encased in thick volcanic armor, slammed a clawed fist on the table, his voice vibrating with barely contained fury. "Human Trisham," he growled. "Your species seeks war through its silence. We can feel it. We know your games." Avery's gaze never faltered, his posture still relaxed as he set the thermos down with a soft clink. "I assure you, Chancellor," he said, his voice calm, almost bored, "Earth seeks nothing of the sort. We're just weighing our options." The Voron leader hissed, but Avery didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. A soft voice from the back of the room cut through the tension. The Seraphi elder, his crystalline form gleaming in the dim light, rose slowly, his voice trembling slightly. "Commander Hale," the elder began, "we watched your people fall silent after the executions. Silence is not a human trait. It disturbs us, this stillness. What does it mean?" Avery tilted his head slightly, considering the question. "Silence is what you hear before the storm," he said softly, almost conversationally. "We're just giving the galaxy time to prepare its umbrellas." Several delegates shivered, though none dared to acknowledge the rising chill. The tension in the room was palpable now. The Seraphi elder, usually a being of serene calm, shifted uneasily. The Klee ambassador, trying to regain some control, hissed, "Your fleets have withdrawn from trade routes. Your colonies have gone dark." "Why, what does this mean?" Avery allowed himself the faintest of smiles, one that made the room feel even colder. "We told them to pack a small bag. Travel gets messy during political transitions." The room fell into an uneasy silence again. "Transitions?" The Voran Chancellor spat, his voice raw with anger. "You speak of transitions while your species retreats into the shadows like cowards?" "No," Avery corrected with surprising gentleness. "We're simply removing ourselves from a situation that no longer serves us." He leaned forward, his eyes locking with the Chancellor's. "The Empire is collapsing, not because we made it fall, but because of the mistakes your leadership made." The Seraphi elder's voice cracked slightly. "Human commander, what is Earth's intention?" Avery took another slow sip of his coffee. "We intend peace always," he said, his voice soft but firm. "Peace is convenient. Peace is efficient. Peace lets us enjoy the things we love, like television." The Chancellor bared his teeth. "Then why all this? Why the silence? Why the secrecy?" Avery straightened. "Because," he said, his voice cold and deliberate, "when someone breaks peace violently, publicly, and with the arrogance of a child playing with fire, then humans are obligated to respond." The chamber trembled as a shrill alert echoed from the walls. Delegates gasped as the central spire overhead flickered and buzzed. "Unidentified distortion wave approaching," the mechanical voice warned. "Source unknown." Avery glanced up, his expression unfazed. "Ah," he murmured with a touch of mild amusement. "Right on time." The delegates turned to him instinctively. They had all felt it, the tremor that rippled through the galaxy. The spire's warning echoed through the chamber. its mechanical voice chilling in its detachment. Every alien delegate turned, their attention fixed on the large screen at the far end of the room. The static flickered briefly, and then the image appeared. A vast nebula, its swirling gases glowing with an eerie violet light, filled the screen. For a moment, it seemed harmless. Just another stretch of the universe's cold expanse, seemingly devoid of meaning. But then something changed. Reflections within the nebula shifted. Tiny, almost imperceptible glimmers of light appeared, and they grew. Avery's calm smile never wavered as the first shapes materialized, sleek, dark silhouettes emerging from the point clouds like shadows coming to life. The delegates gasped. The shapes took form. Hundreds, thousands. Human ships, stealthy and hidden within the depths of the nebula, slipped out of their camouflage. They glided soundlessly, their hulls reflecting starlight like ethereal ghosts. The ships moved with a synchronized precision, as if guided by some unseen force. The Seraphi elder's crystalline voice broke the silence, trembling in disbelief. They, they hid an entire fleet inside a nebula? Avery nodded, his expression unreadable. Yes, he said simply. We learned the technique from ancient fishermen. Camouflage, patience, subtlety. The Voran Chancellor's face twisted in confusion and fear. How, he barked. How could you have hidden so many ships, and for so long? Avery's smile deepened, though his eyes remained cold. Humans are good at adapting old tricks to new problems. We don't need to show everything we have all at once. As the fleet continued to emerge from the nebula, their movements were almost choreographed, impossibly smooth, like a well-rehearsed dance. The alien fleets, scattered across the galaxy in their overconfidence, had never considered such a tactic. They had assumed humanity's fleets were scattered and disorganized, retreating in fear. But now, with the ghostly ships gliding through the stars in perfect synchronization, the galaxy could see the truth. The Empire was not facing a frightened foe. It was facing a force that had been lying in wait, quiet and calculating, until the moment was right. The display flickered again, this time showing the human ships powering up, their engines humming with the promise of impending action. The Nebula fleet, as it came to be known, was ready for whatever came next. Avery's eyes narrowed as the ships powered up, the soft hum of energy crackling across the airwaves. Phase 1 is complete, he said quietly. Now we begin. The alien representatives could only watch as human ships systematically disabled the Empire's surveillance networks, their systems flickering and failing as though caught in the grip of an invisible hand. The Empire's flagship, the towering citadel that had once been the symbol of its invincibility, now appeared weak, defenseless. The chamber was still as the human ships closed in, moving with the precision of a well-executed strategy. Avery turned, his gaze sweeping the room of nervous alien dignitaries. We will not fire, he said, his voice steady. Not yet. We will simply show you what happens when your empire overestimates its control. His words settled like a weight in the room, pressing down on every being present. For the first time, the empire's representatives realized what they were up against. Not just human strength, but the human ability to endure, to plan, and to wait. Phase 2, Avery continued, his voice now cold with resolve. It's time to show them who we really are. Across the nebula, human ships began to shift positions, their movements more deliberate now, their formation tightening. The Empire's fleet, once so sure of itself, was beginning to flounder. Every maneuver it made was anticipated. Every move was countered. Human ships use a technique learned from Earth's naval history, a tactic of entrapment. The alien fleet found itself forced into a crescent formation, its ships herded by the humans with almost mathematical precision. They weren't fighting yet. They weren't firing weapons. They were simply steering the Empire's ships into place. A young officer aboard the Meridian, Avery's flagship, looked up from his console in awe. Sir, we're guiding them without firing a shot. Avery's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. Efficiency is mercy, he said quietly. We don't need to destroy them. We need to show them how fragile they really are. As the Empire's ships collided in disarray, The human forces continued to manipulate the battlefield without so much as a single explosion. The Empire's sensors were overwhelmed by the sheer amount of false information fed to them, a cloak of confusion and disorientation wrapped tightly around their command structure. The alien ships were now completely blind. They couldn't see the humans. They couldn't anticipate their next move. And the humans, humanity, remained calm. The Chancellor of the Voran Empire slammed his fists onto the table in frustration. "How are they doing this?" he roared. Avery looked at him with cold amusement. "Perhaps you should have thought of that before you provoked us," he replied. The galaxy watched, stunned by humanity's brilliance and restraint. No one had expected this. No one had anticipated how far humanity would go to expose the Empire's weakness without firing a single shot. The tension in the Galactic Summit chamber had reached its peak. The once imposing image of the Empire, its grandeur, its might, was unraveling in real time. The delegates could feel it in the air, the realization that humanity was not simply reacting to an act of war, they were rewriting the rules of engagement entirely. Across the vast nebula, the human ships continued their silent, calculated dance, shifting positions with mechanical precision. The Empire's fleets, once the epitome of control, were now tangled in a web of confusion. Their every move was anticipated, countered, and dismantled before it could even be executed. And yet, Avery Hale remained as composed as ever. He sat back in his chair aboard the Meridian, the flagship of Earth's hidden fleet, and watched as the Empire's arrogance began to crumble before their eyes. The battle was still unfolding, but it was no longer a question of if the Empire would lose. It was a matter of how thoroughly it would be exposed. Avery's voice echoed softly through the command center. "Phase 2 is nearly complete. Let them feel the weight of their own ignorance." His words were like a spell, grounding his officers into the realization that this was not just a military operation. It was a demonstration. The human fleet wasn't out to conquer or destroy. They were out to expose a weakness, a fatal flaw within the Empire's armor. In the chamber, the alien delegates were struggling to comprehend what they were seeing. The Seraphi Elder, usually a picture of calm, had his head bowed in quiet horror. The Chromac warlords, who had once laughed at humanity's response, now murmured amongst themselves in uneasy tones. Avery, in his eternal calm, addressed them all again. "I assure you, we do not seek your worlds or your throne. The Empire's power was built on a lie, and it's time for the galaxy to see the truth." His words hung in the air, hanging heavy with the gravity of the situation. The Empire, which had long held sway over the galaxy, was now reeling, not from a human assault, but from its own unraveling. Its systems were collapsing under the pressure of human patience, and its fleets, once feared by all, were being dismantled without a single shot fired. Avery's eyes never wavered as he surveyed the unfolding chaos. "Do you feel it?" he asked, almost rhetorically. "This is not war. This is the moment when your empire finally sees its own reflection and realizes how fragile it truly is." At that moment, a new wave of human ships, the Veilbreaker class, moved into position, their sleek forms cutting through the nebula with a terrifying quiet. Each ship released a small, shimmering pod into the void. One after another, they drifted like seeds scattered by an unseen hand. The alien fleets, already disoriented by the previous manipulations, were utterly unprepared for what came next. As the pods ignited, they unleashed a wave of ionized particles, blanketing the Empire's sensors in a cloud of confusion. What had once been a meticulously organized armada was now a mass of chaotic signals and false readings. The Veilbreaker ships had effectively neutralized the Empire's ability to track and target. The galaxy watched as the Empire's flagship, the Voran Chancellor's personal ship, began to lose all coherence. Their sensors failed, their weapons locked in place, their communication systems turned into static. Avery's voice broke the silence, filled with calm satisfaction. "Let them chase ghosts." The Veilbreaker tactic was a masterpiece of human ingenuity, a display of subtlety and strategy that showcased Earth's ability to manipulate the battlefield without resorting to the destruction they had so often been accused of. The Empire had spent centuries dominating through fear, but now they were being humbled by something far more powerful: patience and intelligence. Meanwhile, the chaos in the imperial capital deepened. The empire's leaders, once so sure of their dominance, were now scrambling to maintain control of their own territory. As they issued frantic commands, their fleets faltered, lost in the maze of false readings and false signals created by the human fleet's careful manipulation. The Voron chancellor, once proud and arrogant, stood before his console in disbelief. This, this can't be happening, he muttered, his voice cracking under the weight of his own failure. How are they doing this? Avery's answer came softly, almost with a touch of sympathy. The empire built its empire on the suffering of others. But when you push people to the edge, you awaken something you can't control. Across the galaxy, species watching the broadcast began to sense it. The shift. The tides of power were changing, not because of a great military conquest, but because humanity had shown the galaxy that there was more to power than just brute force. There was a power in patience, in strategy, in waiting for the perfect moment. And in that moment, humanity had revealed the Empire's greatest weakness, its overconfidence. The galaxy was beginning to understand the lesson being taught. What had started as a quiet demonstration of human resolve had transformed into a full-blown revelation. The Empire, once so feared and revered, was crumbling under its own arrogance, exposed by humanity's calculated patience and intellect. The galaxy's representatives, still watching the unfolding drama, were stunned into silence. No one had anticipated this level of precision, this level of restraint, and most importantly, this level of power disguised as nothing more than a quiet, polite resolve. Avery Hale's voice resonated through the command center of the Meridian, the flagship of Earth's hidden fleet. The human fleet, now in full control of the battlefield, had completed its objective. The Empire's ships were helpless, their systems blind and disoriented. The Nebula fleet had done its job. Now, Phase 2 was complete. Avery stood, hands clasped behind his back, observing the unfolding chaos as the Empire's once imposing ships collided with each other, their movements increasingly erratic. Human vessels, sleek and efficient, continued to hold their formation, guiding the enemy with calculated precision. "We've shown them enough," Avery said quietly, his voice soft but unwavering. "It's time to end this." The moment was upon them. The Empire had been shattered, its power fractured beyond repair. But the question remained, what would humanity do now? The Voron Chancellor, who had once thought himself an invincible leader, now stood on the precipice of defeat. His massive form, encased in volcanic armor, trembled with frustration and fear. His ship, once the pride of the Empire, was now powerless, its systems failing, its crew scrambling to regain control. Avery's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "You misunderstand the purpose of this operation, Chancellor. This is not about destruction. This is about survival." The Voron Chancellor glared at Avery, his voice hoarse. "You've defeated us. What more do you want?" Avery's response was delivered with chilling calm. "We want the future. A future where no empire, human or otherwise, can decide that lives are disposable." The human fleet continued to move in perfect coordination, their ships now positioning themselves in a sweeping ring around the Empire's crumbling forces. The Nebula, once a hiding place for humanity's strength, was now a symbol of their power. The ring of ships glowed like a constellation of stars, their coordinated movements creating an unbreakable boundary. The Empire's ships, now surrounded and immobilized, were powerless. The Voron Chancellor's voice cracked as he barked out commands, but they were meaningless. His forces had been beaten not by superior firepower, but by human strategy, by the very thing the Empire had underestimated, the ability to think beyond the battlefield. Avery turned his gaze to the rest of the galaxy, addressing the assembled representatives. His voice, though steady, carried the weight of the moment. "Let this be a lesson," he said. "You may think your power is absolute, that your empires are invincible. But when you choose to destroy, when you choose to rule by fear, you leave yourselves open to those who understand that the greatest strength lies in patience, in strategy, and in restraint." The human ships remained silent, their weapons powered down. Avery's words echoed through the chamber, cutting through the silence like a clarion call. "We have no desire to destroy, but we will not let the galaxy be ruled by those who think they can impose their will without consequence." As he spoke, The Empire's forces were completely encircled. The Voran Chancellor, his voice shaking, finally relented. "We surrender," he said, his words heavy with defeat. "Unconditionally. Do not destroy us." Avery's gaze never wavered as he nodded slowly. "Surrender is not the purpose of this operation," he replied calmly. "We are not here to destroy you. We are here to show you what happens when you push the galaxy too far." The human fleet began to move again, shifting into a formation that encased the Empire's ships in a shimmering, unbreakable shield. The Voran Chancellor's ship, once a symbol of imperial might, was now a prisoner in the grasp of human mercy. A mercy that would not allow the Empire's citizens to suffer, but would not allow their leaders to escape the consequences of their actions. "Your people will live," Avery continued, his voice softer now. "But your power structures are finished. Your fleets are immobilized. The galaxy will see that the Empire is not invincible, that it can be brought down not through war, but through understanding its own fragility." The Chancellor collapsed to his knees, his voice trembling as he asked, "Why buy? Why show us mercy after all we've done?" Avery's expression darkened as he looked at the trembling leader. "Because two women I respected believed in mercy," he said quietly, "and you took them from us. I will not let their dreams die with them." With those final words, the transmission cut. The galaxy, once certain of its place, was now forced to reckon with the consequences of its actions. Avery turned to his officers, his resolve firm. "Prepare the final broadcast. It's time for the galaxy to hear the truth." The final broadcast was ready. The feed hummed to life as the last of the Empire's fleets were immobilized, their once proud ships now floating inert in the wake of humanity's quiet, yet unyielding strategy. The galaxy, in all its diversity, watched as the last shreds of the Empire's dominance were stripped away, not by force but by the ruthless efficiency of human patience. Avery Hale stood at the command center of the Meridian, his face composed, but beneath the cool exterior, there was a fire, a resolve that had only grown stronger with the deaths of Generals Carter and Montgomery. These were the moments that would define humanity, not just as survivors of an empire's wrath, but as the architects of a new future. A future where mercy, not conquest, was the foundation upon which peace would be built. "Open the transmission," Avery said, his voice steady as the stars themselves. The screens around the galaxy flickered on, filling with the image of Avery standing tall, his uniform immaculate, the weight of leadership in his posture. Behind him, the faint glow of the Candlefall Formation shimmered, a symbol of humanity's power, subtle, serene, and utterly indomitable. His voice rang clear across every network, every channel that had once carried the proud declarations of the Empire. "To the citizens of the galaxy," he began, his tone unshakable, "we have acted with restraint where others would have acted with vengeance. We were provoked. We were violated. We were humiliated. Two of our greatest generals were taken from us in an act designed to break us, to make us kneel." Avery's gaze, unwavering, scanned the room. The alien representatives, once so certain of their superiority, now stood frozen in awe. Some of them, like the Chromac warlords, could only grit their teeth in frustration, while others, such as the Seraphi scholars, seemed to tremble with a strange respect for the humanity that had quietly dismantled the Empire's facade. "But the Empire's cruelty has shown us something deeper," Avery continued, his voice softening but gaining intensity. "It has shown us fragility. It has shown us fear. A civilization that rules by force is always one step away from its own destruction. And that destruction comes not from an external enemy, but from its own hubris." As the camera zoomed in on his face, the seriousness in his eyes deepened. "We do not want your worlds. We do not want your people. We do not want your throne. What we want," he paused, letting the weight of his words sink in, "is the future. A future where no empire, human or otherwise, can decide that lives are disposable." The screen behind him flickered briefly, showing images of the Empire's fleets, once untouchable, now disarmed, surrounded by human ships in a formation that stretched across the stars. The symbol of Earth's power was not destruction, but the refusal to be ruled by the arbitrary decisions of another. "The Empire," Avery continued, his voice filled with quiet authority, has been brought to its knees, not because we destroyed them, but because they destroyed themselves with their own arrogance. The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the galaxy. Avery's calm, collected demeanor seemed to cut through the uncertainty that had gripped the galaxy for so long. "Let this day mark the beginning of a new era," he said, his voice firm. "Not one of conquest, not one of domination, but one of a truth. We will not rule over you. We will guide. We will protect. But understand this, humanity's patience has limits. And when those limits are tested, our silence is not a sign of surrender. It is a warning."